This is the original manuscript for Dixie, Dan Emmett's Dixieland, a Southern battle song. Emmett was a musician with Bryant's Minstrel, more or less musical director. He composed a lot of their pieces. And this was written in 1859, just before the Civil War, as a minstrel walk-around, they called it. It was played, let's see, it was published by Firth Pond and Company in 1860, the year after it was written, and played all over the country, became quite popular, but in the South, where things were getting very hot and tense, it was picked up as the practically anthem of the Confederacy, a battle song.
Oh.
Emmett himself, of course, didn't mean to write it that way.
No, but I don't know if they still do or not, probably don't. Tradition is dying out, but when I was a child in Virginia, everyone stood up when they played Dixie. They might remember to do it at the Star Spangled Banner, but Dixie, everyone rose to their feet. Yeah.
It is written on two sides of one sheet of paper. Various words for the verse are different from the words that you and Kay and I learned. Over the years they've changed. But this is Emmett's original first draft. He identified it in 85. It was reproduced in the Confederate Veteran magazine, printed in Atlanta. And he wrote a letter that accompanied it, and they reproduced that. We have a reproduction of it, saying that this was his first draft. And the photograph shown then in 1885, and I think I'm right on that date, had the same discoloration, spots here. The torn page had not dropped out, but it was a tear in it. And of course I could spot that. And oddly enough, it has a strange aberration in key signature. It's written in the key of D, two sharps. But for some odd reason, Emmett had put one sharp, F sharp in, then had written the tempo signature or identification there 2/4 time, and then wrote the C sharp, the second C sharp, later as an afterthought. Here it is as it should have been written. And this little passage was something I had never seen, but we did hear it in a recording by the Mormon choir when they did a record of Dixie, and this was used as a little interlude passage. And it is like a flute characteristic. Emmett played flute in an army band when he was a young man, and this thing is a beautiful running thing in the manner of a flute, and this was done between each chorus. It gives me goose pimples whenever I hear it. And that's Emmett's picture around on the wall behind you there. That was taken, I believe, in 1895 when he went on tour, sort of a grand final tour. He had given up his work as a minstrel man, but he was taken on tour by, let's see, who was the well-known
famous minstrel
man who thought a lot of him. He was sort of protege of Dan Emmett. It took him all through the South because it meant the world to Emmett to get the...
How did it come in your possession?
My great-grandmother, Mary Louise Bird, married Emmett as her second husband. And the two couples had known each other in New York. My great-grandfather, George Bird, for whom I'm named, was a friend of Emmett's. And one of my great-grandmother's brothers, Frank Brower, was in Emmett's first minstrel company. Emmett formed the first minstrel company in 1845 and took them to England. And Frank Brower was one of them.
Yeah.
So that more or less tied them up.
He was practically the designer, you might say, of the minstrel as a form of music.
Minstrel. Emmett's wife died while he was still in New York, and my great-grandfather, George Bird, died. And after that, my great-grandmother moved to Chicago with her two daughters my grandmother Evans, and Emmett went out there as musical director of the McVickers Theater. They met and married out there, and at that time my father, who was just a young boy, 7 or 8 years old, lived with them on the south side of Chicago, and he had memories of Emmett, and actually had some of his manuscript, music manuscript, that Emmett had written with a quill pen. It was beautifully done, bold manuscript. Emmett later went back to his hometown of Mount Vernon, Ohio. He had had enough of the big city, and my grandmother didn't care to go back to Mount Vernon, Ohio with him, so they separated.
Well,
And that's where he lived. He died, lived his life.
it was just a friendly separation. It wasn't like a
It was
breakup
just a
in a
matter she didn't
marriage,
care
but
to
she
do.
didn't want to go back there.
Well, she never had lived there, actually.
No, she'd
And
never
it was
lived
from-
outside of the
It was from
city.
Mount Vernon that he went on this tour. I wish I could think of the name of the minstrel man who took him around. And Emmett would go out on stage and was unable to do much more than go out and take a bow and say Dixie or something like that. Of course, the crowd just went wild. So he was living in Mount Vernon at that time in 1895, and he died about, I would say 1902 or 1903, something like that.